They're the kind of guys that rob you, rape your children, and then demand that you thank them because they're good. Hey everybody, it's James Freeman out here at the Roswell Police Department again, because the last time that I was out here they weren't open. I recommend Roswell passing through. I don't recommend anybody stop and stay for any amount of time. An hour or two, you've kind of seen what you need to see. I'd recommend getting out. You know what they use that war machine for?
It's a SWAT vehicle for SWAT operations.
You work here?
I do the alarms for them.
Oh, really? Kind of a contractor type deal?
Yes.
Right on. What do you think of this, man? War equipment on the streets of the U.S.
As long as it protects the officers and the citizens, more of it.
What if it only protects the officers and it doesn't protect the citizens?
Well, it's got to, by that protecting the officers can protect citizens.
Really?
I mean, if they go in there into a SWAT operation and get hurt, they can't help anybody.
So we've got the war machine right here. I get a better shot of it during the day than I could at night. And I don't have the numbers off the top of my head of SWAT raids, but the good thing about video like this is that I don't actually, I mean, it's good to have some numbers off the top of your head, but most of the videos that I create are really for the viewer, more than the individuals that I'm talking to in the video. So I get to take and paste the actual statistics into the video later.
In 1972, paramilitary police units launched a few hundred drug raids annually within the United States. By the early 1980s, SWAT drug raid numbers increased to 3,000 annually, and by 1996, the raids had increased to 30,000 annually. Most SWAT raids have been used for drug busts, not on large drug cartels, but low-level drug users and drug dealers in the war on drugs. In the early 1970s, when the war on drugs began, it was said that about 1.3% of the U.S. population was addicted to illicit drugs. 40 years, billions of dollars, and thousands of lives later, that number sits at an identical 1.3%.
Yeah, they have a lot of equipment everywhere.
How's it going, man?
What's up, man?
Scott.
I'm James. How you doing?
Nice to meet you. Can I help you with something?
I was curious about the military equipment you guys got out there.
Sure. You want to go take a look at it?
Yeah, sure. Can I ask some questions about it too, and what you guys do with it? And
You can ask me whatever you want, man.
all right. How did you guys get a hold of it? Those things are pretty expensive, right?
They are. It was actually a grant from the federal government. I don't know exactly how it works.
Sorry, I'm all out of order, but on the same note, that sticker there says support your local police and keep them independent.
Yeah.
So on the same note, kind of what does that mean? As far as independent, you mean independent of the feds, or not sure?
I have no idea. That's the first I've seen that sticker. I don't spend a lot
Okay.
of time in the lobby, so.
All right, cool.
So yeah, to answer your other question, it was given to us on I believe it was some kind of federal grant program,
Okay.
like an overflow from the military,
Right.
to kind of help out local law enforcement with our high-risk operations.
Right.
But it's called the MRAP.
Okay.
It's basically, I can't remember what it stands for. What does MRAP stand for again?
It's mine resistant something.
Mine resistant armored personnel vehicle, something
Yeah.
along those lines.
Yeah.
Sounds fancy enough. But,
So it's really intended as an armored personnel carrier, not an assault vehicle. Is that right?
yeah, I wouldn't label it as an assault vehicle. We don't really do assaulting as a police department. We don't really do assaulting as a police department.
I think some people
we're not.
would beg to differ, but
Some people might. I mean, obviously, it's just a matter of opinion. But we just use it for protection for ourselves on those vulnerable moments where you're rolling up to a high-risk search warrant, armed barricaded subjects, hostage situations, pretty much anything that our SWAT team would roll up on.
Mine resistant, ambush protected.
There you go.
okay. So what would you guys consider high risk? Do you get marijuana is legal in New Mexico now? Is that correct?
Legal in New Mexico? There's medical marijuana that's legal in New Mexico.
Okay, so not.
It's been decriminalized, but it's not necessarily like you can't just walk down the street smoking a joint. It's basically, instead of getting an arrest citation, you would get a non-traffic citation for it.
See, it's a fine.
Pretty much.
Government says you owe us money.
Like,
You've
no,
got the
we're
wrong
gonna seatbelt in
plant.
your car.
Okay. So
Yeah.
would you guys use something like this to bust? Say we got a marijuana dealer. Would you guys possibly use something like this to
Marijuana search warrants, even like drug-related search warrants, aren't generally listed as high risk unless there's a history, unless we specifically know the suspect has a history of violence either towards other people or towards police, armed and dangerous type situations. But
according to the ACLU, 62% of SWAT raids surveyed were to conduct searches for drugs. Just under 80% were to serve a search warrant, meaning 8 in 10 SWAT raids were not initiated to apprehend a school shooter, hostage taker, or escaped felon, the common justification for these tactics, but to investigate someone still only suspected of committing a crime. In fact, 7% of SWAT raids were for hostage, barricade, or active shooter scenarios. In at least 36% of SWAT raid studies, no contraband of any kind was found. The report notes that due to incomplete police reports on these raids, this figure could be as high as 65%. SWAT tactics are disproportionately used on people of color. 65% of SWAT deployments resulted in some sort of forced entry into a private home by way of battering ram, boot, or some other sort of explosive device. In over half of those raids, the police failed to find any sort of weapon, the presence of which was cited as the reason for the violent tactics. Though often justified for rare incidents like school shootings or terrorist situations, the armored personnel vehicles police are getting from the Pentagon and through grants from the Department of Homeland Security are commonly used on drug raids. In other words, where violent, volatile SWAT tactics were once used only in limited situations where someone was in the process of or about to commit a violent crime, where the police were using violence only to defuse an already violent situation, SWAT teams today are overwhelmingly used to investigate people who are still only suspected of committing non-violent consensual crimes. And because these raids often involve forced entry into homes, often at night, they're actually creating violence and confrontation where there was none before.
we don't really do assaulting as a police department.
Okay.
Just something narcotic related, whether it be, we don't consider marijuana a narcotic. You're looking at your felony level drugs, heroin, meth, things of that nature. But marijuana is even felony distribution of marijuana is generally something that our narcotics division will handle. So we don't really take this kind of stuff. We don't really use SWAT on those types of operations.
Okay. What is it that makes you guys decide that someone is armed and dangerous and that...
Well, there'd have to be some form of evidence, whether it's a previous crime they've committed or threats they've made or something to deem somebody armed and dangerous. And a lot of the times it's going to go off of a criminal history. They've been convicted or arrested for aggravated battery or shooting at or from a motor vehicle or a felon in possession of a firearm. A whole list of different criteria. Or we have information from a confidential informant that says, hey, this guy says he's going to shoot it out with the police if he ever gets busted, you know.
But we have evidence that police often pay confidential informants specifically to tell a lie to obtain a search warrant. We also have evidence from Houston recently that police will claim that they have information from a confidential informant to obtain a search warrant where a confidential informant was never even involved at all. In that particular case, a SWAT raid was conducted based on the information from a confidential informant that just flat out didn't even exist. In that raid, 2 innocent people were murdered and 5 officers were injured.
According to the original search warrant, a confidential informant bought heroin at the house the day before the shooting. But according to new documents ABC 13 obtained, that may not be the case. This all revolves around an undercover officer. Investigators went to that officer's hospital bed where he gave them the name of 2 different informants. Investigators later questioned all confidential informants who had worked with the officer, and the confidential informants all denied making a buy from the residence located at 7815 Harding Street and ever purchasing narcotics from Regina Nicholas or Dennis Tuttle. On top of that, the particular informant in question said in the past there had been times when the undercover officer paid him money but did not require him or her to do any actual work for him.
And so it has to be some actionable intelligence for us to say, hey, you know, we need to use SWAT in this situation because A, B, and C.
Okay.
It's basically like a checklist that we use. You know, if the risk to us meets a certain criteria, then we're going to take something like this. And all it is just to protect us. There's no mounted guns on it or anything like that.
Right,
The most
right,
vulnerable
right.
moments for us, talking about the MRAP specifically and the equipment that we use, are when we're driving up to the front of somebody's house or we don't use it for mobile takedowns because it's not very mobile. It sounds like an F-16 driving down the road, and it's not very fast, doesn't handle very well. So it's big and bulky, but it protects us when we're rolling up to get set up in front of a house. It's been shot.
Oh, it has been shot at.
Oh yeah, I'll show you where the bullet strikes are at. It saved my life.
So you guys have used it out here multiple times?
Oh yeah, we use it all the time.
Fairly regularly, or?
This one right here is
Oh yeah, that's
Okay. Oh man, what kind of round was that? Do you know?
9mm.
9mm. All right.
The tires got popped, which was a learning experience for us.
Really?
You know, we figured like at least the handgun round would bounce off or redirect it or stop it. No, it popped it, and it didn't go through it. But it definitely, we had our guys standing on the other side, and the bullets were going underneath it, right by their legs. I was up in the overwatch position, and that's when that one hit, and my hand got hit with a ricochet. So it saved my
Your
life.
hand got hit?
It was just a ricochet.
Yeah,
It didn't
yeah,
shoot
yeah.
anything, and that was what, 2 years ago? Year and a half, 2 years ago. So yeah, it just protects us so we can go home to our families. That's all.
What would you think if someone like myself rolled up in this into your parking lot to film you guys?
Rolled up in this, I think that'd be pretty cool that you were able to get one of these.
Yeah, I'm sure there's all
Because they're
kinds
pretty
of special
expensive.
licenses, and yeah, they're expensive.
So the government gave you guys this equipment, right? The federal government.
It's just on loan, basically. That we don't own it. They didn't give it to us. They just allow us to use it, but it's still their property.
I'll tell you what my personal concern with that is. I told you earlier about that FBI memo that was sent out. I know for a fact from experience that the federal government cannot stop lying. Like anything that comes out of their mouth now, I just automatically assume is a lie. And so if they're giving you guys toys and equipment to use, whether it's something that is fun or it's something that truly saves your life, does that mean that you owe them something? Does that mean that when they ask you to do something to citizens, like enforce red flag laws or something like that, that you might be inclined to say, well, all right, cool, I know I shouldn't do this, but if I don't do it, I'm going to lose the equipment that saves my life?
Well, I get that concern, but we look at it more as we all work together, and we necessarily couldn't afford something like this without that program.
I see that being a concern in the back of your head, and it's definitely something worth paying attention to. But as of right now, in this moment, I wouldn't put a whole lot of worry into it because we work autonomously from the federal government. A lot of times, like even local stuff, they pick up our cases. Like we'll do most of the legwork, and then they'll pick up our cases, talking about criminal cases, and prosecute them that way. So they don't have influence on what we do on a day-to-day basis. We're responsible to the people in the city of Roswell, and obviously when you talk about the county, the sheriff's office is responsible to the citizens in Chavez County.
I want you to help wage a discriminatory, ineffective drug war. There's free money in it.
So I can't tell you whether Scott is lying or just mistaken that these government handouts to these welfare recipients don't influence their day-to-day policing. But the fact is that without the federal government giving these welfare recipients all of this money and equipment to fight the war on drugs, they never would have been able to fight the war. In other words, these welfare handouts always have and always will influence their day-to-day policing, whether they realize it or not. Without this welfare money, there's a good chance that Scott's job might not even exist.